Well, what's up, guys? Welcome back to the Collision Live. Glad you joined us. It's me, Daniel, and I'm joined at the desk, as I always am, by the raw vegetables to my cookie monster, Mr. Samuel David Kemp. What is up?
Well, my 3-year-old made pink sprinkle chocolate chip cookies yesterday, and I have to say they were delicious.
You don't have to pretend that they were delicious. They were legit.
Oh no, they were. She's a very good baker, and I'm a very good eater of baked goods. So we make a great team.
That's how God designed it, the arrangement. But like I said, we're glad you've joined us. This has been an absolute week. There has been so much going on, good, a lot of just bad stuff. It's crazy stuff, just personally, and just a lot going on, including the fact that we lost part of our crew. We have no idea where Steven is. Our technician that runs these live streams is nowhere to be found. So hey, if you hear rumors, if you see a sighting of him, let us know as we try and track him down. But thankfully, Joni is sort of doing. She's like growing octopus arms and running all the stuff behind the scenes. So thankful for her. But I'm tired. Your week, is it going about the same as
I
my
think
week?
it's probably about the same as your week. It's on par to just kind of be ready to be over.
Yeah, and again, we're about to hit fall break, mercifully in a couple of days, a much needed break. So hey, if this live stream just sort of tanks and burns and everything goes wrong, join us again next week. We'll be back on track. But there is a lot of interesting stuff for us to talk about, a lot of things to dig into. I think some important topics and just some fun kind of pop culture stuff. I did want to share before we kind of get into the main show. Just sort of a personal, one of the good things that came out of this last week is that I actually just signed a book contract the other day with David C. Cook for a book that I'll be co-authoring with my brother, who I've written some other books with. If you guys aren't familiar with the publisher, David C. Cook, they've done like the Chosen, the show, The Chosen. They've done all like the resources and Bible studies for that show, and also like the action. I don't know if you're familiar with the Action Bible. It's like kind of the comic book Bible. You see it everywhere. It's like in Walmart. It's in. It's all over the place. It's really cool. I'm so excited for that. It's a long process, so I think the estimated release date for that is fall of next year, and it's kind of like an apologetics worldview book, but kind of more an aesthetic, kind of emotional, experiential, kind of cultural. This is a different kind of approach to that. So stay tuned for that.
I think it'll be a very good resource for what we're doing here at the Collision. So I think it'll tie in nicely, assuming you write it well.
Yeah, now
it's worth reading.
Signing the contract's the fun part. The hard part is actually, hey, now I got to write this thing at some point. So hey, excited to share that. But why don't we kind of get into it? We got to get some interesting topics to talk about. So the first segment of our show, we have cultural conversations. Or maybe we imagine that you just saw a fancy buffer video, and we're back to talk about cultural conversations. A lot of interesting stuff to dig into. What's our first story?
Yeah, well, probably the biggest story, and if you're alive, you probably already know this, but R.I.P. to Her Royal Highness Queen Elizabeth II, died this past week. Marking a 70-year reign over Great Britain, and what a legacy she's had. Been some mixed reactions, I guess, online. Daniel, do you have a favorite Queen memory that you can share with us today?
Well, actually, if my sister and mother were here, they could share their memory. Last time, a couple times I've been to England, been to Buckingham Palace as a tourist, not as like a VIP guest. But the last time we were there, I think I forget. I was looking at some old gravestone or doing something historical, and
important.
And the lady folk in our family went off and actually saw the Queen drive by. Right down the street. I don't know where she was going to. So anyway, I feel like she's a family friend at this.
Practically. Well, I think it's interesting just because, monarchies aside, she has played I think an enormous role in our culture, and has been a very obviously long-standing figure in our culture as well. And so I think. And obviously a person of faith, and I think that's rare these days. Someone as high up as she is, and it's like
because I do think that some of of course, it's politicized. Of course, there's people arguing about it because hey, that's just the world we live in. But I think for a lot of people, whether or not you have a real close attachment. We're obviously filming this in America. I grew up in Canada, not British, but I do think she kind of represents like tradition and like kind of an older way. For some people that's a problem. For other people, I think there is sort of almost like this sense of loss, not just for like a person, but like kind of what she represented. Like
so it's the end of an era, I think.
Yeah, end of an era.
Certainly.
One of those people you sort of thought would maybe live forever, but hey, so raise one up for the queen. Maybe she rest in peace. Kind of another more in like the cultural or pop culture news arena. D23, which is kind of like the Disney's version of Comic-Con, where they just like trick. It's basically a whole like thing that's just like promotion and marketing, but they trick you into thinking that it's like some like fun event like for you, for the people. Here's all the things you can give us money for. But they do. That's a lot of like the announcements for. And again, Disney owns everything, so it's Marvel and Star Wars and Lucasfilm, and so they had that. And kind of announced a lot of different new products and things coming up, things for like really the next couple of years for us to get excited about. Any of these things like you were?
I was telling you before we went live, I really, nothing really stood out. And I think maybe the thing that stood out was just the number of like sequels and prequels and remakes. I mean, I don't know if there was much like original.
Yeah, because that's
content.
I think for me,
it's just sort of like it's another one of the same.
Remember that thing you liked, this many years ago? Well, enjoy it again. And again, I think there were a few that were kind of original. Like I think it's like Elementals, like the new Pixar, which is like a fire element, and like a water one. I think like Fall in Love, but like they can't even touch each other, and like they're like opposites attract or whatever or react, whatever the tagline is for that. And that looked interesting. There was like I think it's maybe Win or Lose. There's like I think it's a show. You see that's like a baseball team. It's animated, but like I think it's like 10 episodes or something. But like every episode is like the same events, but from like the perspective of a different player on the team.
I missed that.
And I'm sure they're gonna. It just seems like the kind of show that's gonna be trying to push some boundaries and like LGBTQ stuff. And like again, maybe it won't be, but I think there's gonna be some stuff in there. But this is the concept of that. It's like, hey, that's unique.
Because that's sort of what they did with that. What was that like night movie? KNIGHT with Matt Damon and Adam Driver. The Last Duel, I think.
The Last Duel, yeah.
That was sort of one of those like perspective shifts, which I thought was kind of interesting, and so that might be cool.
So they are doing some, but again, especially if you saw like the pictures on social media, like the big screens and like displays, like like they're making like a live action like prequel to like Simba, it's like Mufasa, and like there's even like some of their original stuff like Inside Out, which is one of Pixar's best movies. Like they're making Inside Out 2, and like it is like it's very much just heavy in on like here's the stuff you're nostalgic about. Because
you can't. I feel like Disney's the sort of place that you really can't blame them for doing that, because like that sort of is their thing. It's like they just capitalize on the properties
which is crazy, because I wish I'd pulled the tweet, because like someone was tweeting about that, saying like all those original things, like back in the day, like Disney was just like revolutionary and like pushing the boundaries, like all these things that we're nostalgic about, like it's because they were these like very brand new, pushing the edge, and like now it's very much seems like it's like I think that same person that was talking about it online is sort of like, what are like Gen Z, like some of these, or like the generation below them, like what are they going to be nostalgic about? Because like I feel like so much of the entertainment now is still banking on like the nostalgic of like our generation.
Well, and I think too, there's just so much more entertainment now, so there's not going to be as many like cultural touchstones, I think, for like kids today to sort of latch on to. It'll be like, oh well, I grew up watching this, or I watched that, or whatever, and hopefully everyone grew up watching Indiana Jones. As Monty mentioned in the chat, in Indy 5. Harrison Ford still rocking the hat.
Yeah, still going strong. What
still
is he?
digging up fossils.
He must be maybe. I'm sure Monty knows. Is he like 80?
I think he's like 80, like 85.
And like he's the man. I am excited. They didn't release like the footage for that, but I am excited. Speaking of just nostalgic stuff that I want to see again,
maybe like they could have just done away with everything else and just said like Indiana Jones 5. Here's the trailer. You can all go home now.
But again, I'm excited. Again, the Marvel stuff. The more reveals they do, the more I realize how checked out I am, and like I'm glad people enjoy it. Like I just don't care. Like I'm sure I'll see the movies, or at least most of them, to review them, but I won't check out the shows, and probably wouldn't check out half the movies unless I had to for the collision.
Yeah.
But I know people are excited for that. But hey, let us know what you guys are excited about. Is there too much? Are we kind of leaning too far into the here, you enjoyed it once, enjoy it again. Keep it into it. We'd love to.
Yeah, and I think speaking of things we love, I know you're excited for the live-action remake of The Little Mermaid, your favorite movie of all time.
Definitely high on the list of properties that I'm excited to revisit.
With a twist, though, and so the leading actress in that is African American, and I think this sort of opens up a conversation that the internet has been having. And maybe not necessarily Little Mermaid specifically, but just sort of racism in casting and all of those fun topics. What have you been seeing? I guess there's been Little Mermaid, Rings of Power. I think even the Obi-Wan series, there was some dust up about that as well. And are we surrounded by a bunch of racists who don't like to see African Americans on?
Because even Percy Jackson, which hasn't come out yet, but they released at that D23 the first trailer, and I don't know the books. I watched the first original movies. I think her name's Annabella, this character that was white in the books and in the first show, and she's African American in the shows. There's a lot of discussion, and I do think it's become really, and I think it's unfortunate. I do think it's more nuanced than on both sides of because I think the Obi-Wan Kenobi, which you mentioned, I think we talked about that last week, where it's I thought she was a bad character. I think she was needless in the show. I don't think her character arc went anywhere, but it's become sort of on one side, if you have any issues with the casting and it happens to be a person of color, and it's very quick to well, you must be a racist. And it's
right.
I don't like the character. If she was any other ethnicity, I still wouldn't like the character. I guess the problem is the character, not the I thought the actress is fine. I thought she was just cast in something else. She's a good actress. But I do think on the other hand, it's become very clear that there is something kind of deep rooted where whether it's just I think there's a good hefty dose of just good old fashioned racism that comes up in these.
No doubt.
But I do think maybe for other people, it is maybe a more a deep seated fear, I don't know. I feel like it's reflecting a lot of stuff that as a society and stuff, I think I wish we would work through it better, but things I'm glad are being worked out. As far as sort of this, I don't know, it's almost this sort of this fear of the standard is this kind of all these white people, and anything that's not that is this agenda to push away from that, rather than more hey, we're sort of course correcting to get more of a diverse Hollywood than we.
Yeah, and I think that's I think course corrections are oftentimes messy, and I think that's probably a lot of what you're seeing now can be attributed to messy course corrections, and it doesn't mean that they're always going to get it right, and it doesn't mean that people are always going to be comfortable with those. And so I just think it's something to be aware of, and maybe don't jump to your team side one way or the other when you do see those things where it's the ethnicity of a character has changed. How important is that, and how big a deal should that be, and how much should we actually care about that? So
and I do think, like I said, I think it reflects the fact that we sort of, for a lot of people, just have this in our mind that sort of the all white traditional cast is the norm, and how dare we're pushing away from the norm, or I heard it the other day of someone we just need to cast the best actors, we don't need to force these diversity hires or casting, and implicit in that is always that the best cast, the best actors must all be white, because if they don't, then it's not so again, I think it's an important discussion. I do think it is more of a, it's not helpful just to you're a racist. No, not I think there is a discussion to have, and as Christians, we should be involved in that discussion.
But apparently what we all know is happening is the theaters are dying.
Well, apparently, according to Mr. Bob Iger, the
Mr. Disney himself,
or at least Mr. Former Disney, the former CEO who is this? It seems like this guy's just loving retire. I know he's not retired, whatever he's doing, but
He's like a chairman
but
or something.
it's sort of like he doesn't have to deal with it anymore. It's like he just sort of pipes in and like criticizes and like, I wouldn't have done that. Anytime Disney does something bad, he's sort of like, well, it was fine under me. But so he was piping again, not necessarily as negative or like criticizing as that, but basically saying that he thinks that the movie theater, kind of the quote is that is never going to return to like the pre-COVID levels. The way he put it in an interview he just did is that coronavirus pandemic has left a permanent scar. I don't think movies will ever return in terms of moviegoing to the level they were pre-pandemic. That's just kind of choice is the main thing. People got comfortable watching things at home and realized, hey, I can enjoy this without going to the theater.
Which I would say I'm one of those. Like I haven't been to the theater since probably before the pandemic. Or no, maybe I've gone once since this, in the past 2 years. But I would say, I don't know, maybe I'm jumping ahead of you here, but to his point, yes, the landscape has certainly changed, but I don't think it's all like we just don't like the theater. I think one, like ticket prices at the theater have gone up significantly. Two, there's like, I think in that same article that you shared, it's like half as many movies have come out this year as like 2019. And so it's like, well, yeah, like ticket sales aren't very high because it's like half the movies have come to theaters.
And half of them are just bad movies.
Yeah, and like most of them aren't worth watching in the theater. Yeah. And it's like, well, we know it's going to come to streaming and,
Like we got Morbius in theaters twice this year.
Like
one of the worst movies of the year, and they released it again and again, we've talked about this before, so we don't need to go super deep into it. Like I think it does matter as Christians and stuff, like the way we engage and like, kind of approaching our movies and stuff and stories like at home is different than kind of some of the social ties and kind of doing it like as an introvert. I enjoy when I can watch this, even for like a review or something, like when I can watch it at home rather than I have to drive to the theater and like sit beside other humans. And but I do think some of the at least to me, like my own hot take on this is like I feel like studios and stuff have almost like telling people that they're more like it's almost like they've decided that people don't want to go to, because like they're releasing way less movies and like a lot of things that would be maybe like a bigger like that would be like a theater movie is like, oh, we're just gonna put it on like we need to grow our streaming platform, so all these Pixar movies and stuff are gonna go on like the platform. We're not gonna release them in theaters, and it's almost like this like self-fulfilling prophecy of like we're not gonna put anything good in theaters. It's all gonna be on streaming, and then like because no one's going to the theaters now, like clearly people just want things on streaming. So like. So I don't know. It becomes sort of this like
self-fulfilling prophecy.
Because then like a movie like Top Gun, or when there is like a good movie, it's like those movies are doing just as good as like pre-pandemic.
Yeah,
movies.
And I don't know. I think I've said this on here before, but I think I think there is a lot of room for innovation in like the movie theaters, and so I think I'm not seeing like a lot of things happening. Like pushing the envelope for theaters and sort of what that might look like, or how they may adapt to sort of the new landscape to make theaters great again. And so I don't know. I think some of that may just be sort of laziness, on the part of the theaters, just kind of saying, oh well, our hands are tied. Like everybody just loves to stay home. It's like, well, I think if you have a compelling reason to come to the theater, then I think there's obviously an appetite for people to go to the theater. It's just you need to maybe tweak those ticket prices and figure out what is that formula to get people
or
there.
Just re-release the extended editions of the Lord of the Rings as a marathon.
That would solve it. I think that would make up the difference of however many billions.
And that would just
sales.
Be my tickets as I went there. Hey, let us know. Are you guys like do you enjoy watching from home, or do you still sort of miss some of that like theatrical? Because it is a very different experience when you have like everyone cheering and stuff, or like, reacting around you, as opposed to like checking your phone and like eating noodles or something on the couch as you watch some show that you're only half paying attention to. I think it does change this sort of the way we consume or like approach entertainment. But speaking of other things to consume and approach, the next segment of our show we have Host Corner. So this is my turn to share something near and dear to me. Again, like I said, this has been an absolute week, so I didn't want to go too far into the well and think through anything super complicated. So I thought I would just share one of my favorite bands in the history of music. As you can guess, this is absolutely a metal band. Rhapsody of Fire, he used to be named Rhapsody, legal issues. Rhapsody of Fire is still a killer name. This is in Italian, kind of one of the pioneers of symphonic power metal with some neoclassical guitar riffs thrown in there. So this is a band that's totally, this is like cheesier than like a Chuck E. Cheese pizza. Like, is full-on fantasy storytelling. At one point, about halfway through their career, they actually recruited the late and great Sir Christopher Lee, Saruman himself, Dracula, to do like the narration, so that they have like long narrated, almost like an audiobook between songs, or sometimes in the middle of a song for this story. This band has been going strong for since I think like the very late 80s, maybe the early 90s. They have I think like 12 albums, which are all fantastic. So if you've never checked them out, again, they've switched singers and guitar players. So if you YouTube them or if you do go check them out, listen to a couple songs. So they've changed kind of over the years, but definitely some good stuff if you want to kind of be soared away to some fantastical land of unicorns and creatures. But on a scale of 1 to 10, Sam, like, how interested are you in Rhapsody of Fire's discography?
10 being very interested.
Yeah, and 1 being quite interested, but I haven't checked it out yet.
I'll go with 1 then. No, I love going to mystical lands of dragons and unicorns as much as the next guy. So maybe I'll have to put that on shuffle and use it next time I need to get some work done that doesn't require me listening to anything else.
It will pump you up. It will make you want to go fight dragons. So, hey, a hard recommend for me. But maybe something that is not a hard recommend. The main topic, the main conversation in our show, based on a show that a lot of people are upset about or talking about. Or should we watch this? Should this even exist? But why don't you kind of set this up? Because you sort of brought this to my attention, actually.
Yeah, I don't actually know too much about the show other than some headline stuff, but it's interesting that you should have the Rhapsody of Fire. Another fiery place is hell, in fact. And
that is a killer segue.
I had to work it in there somehow. So there's a cartoon, I think it's called The Little Demon, and it's about someone, I think, weds the devil and births the Antichrist, who is this kid, teenager, or I guess is presumably the protagonist of this tale. But it's been in the headline as like, Disney's coming for your kids, and, it's a show about the Antichrist, and, watch out, like, hide your kids and, turn off the internet. So that's sort of been...
Yeah, it's been very much kind of went from like 0 to full blown like panic and outrage like overnight, and kind of from I think what started, besides just the content of the show itself, which was I think intentionally made to spark outrage, kind of what like brought it to like I guess more like public conversation is a politician, Congressman Mike Johnson. Kind of posted on his personal, or maybe it was his account, Facebook, about this, kind of sharing that he was sitting down watching a football game with his family, and all of a sudden a preview, a trailer, a teaser for this Little Demon show came on. So he kind of posted his thoughts about that he thought it was inappropriate and couldn't believe it, and kind of what is being put out on the in the entertainment these days, and kind of from there, a lot of conversation, a lot of talk about it. So if you, again, like Sam kind of explained the show, the official synopsis says this: as 13 years after being impregnated by Satan, a reluctant mother, Laura, and her Antichrist daughter, Chrissy, attempt to live an ordinary life in Delaware, but are constantly thwarted by monstrous forces, including Satan, who yearns for custody for his daughter's soul. So again, it's very clear what this show is about. But there has been, I think understandably, I think intentionally, there's been a lot of kind of from like Christian circles, just concern bordering, maybe crossing the line into like full blown panic of kind of, like sort of this sort of seems to fall into another into like another example, I guess, like in the realm of like Disney's coming for our kids. Like this has been a narrative that that's been kind of growing. It's been out there, again, not totally unfounded. Like there's definitely issues with this. So there's been people kind of all over the internet kind of talking about this. So I thought we'd get into this. In some ways, this is more of a like this maybe would have been more of like a cultural conversation. Just sort of, hey, here's a thing going on in culture, not like a general thing. But I do think that maybe again, we had someone ask us to talk about this, so we thought we'd get into it. But it is almost like a case study, I think, for like how do you kind of navigate things like this, because this does seem to sort of embody so many of just sort of these type of situations and kind of outrages. But you sort of hear about this show. What are your initial takeaways from this?
Yeah, well, I think if you like look online, sort of the initial thing is like, hey, like Disney's like promoting this show for kids, but it's clearly not a kids show. And I think like sort of the response has been like oh no, like we need to like unsubscribe from Disney and like shut it all down and boycott and all the rest of it. And look, this is them coming for kids. And I think as what can sometimes happen is sort of an initial reaction to this happens, and then it just kind of takes on a life of its own. And I think that's somewhat the case here. Like I think first of all, I don't think it's even on like the Disney app. I think Disney owns the company that's producing or making the shows, and I think it airs like late at night, and so I don't think it is a show just because it's a cartoon about a teenager doesn't mean that it's a show for kids. And so I think some of that can kind of get lost in translation. And
because I do think there's been like there is this sort of like we've talked about it before, like like Disney has become sort of this like the embodiment of like the villain for like it sort of symbolizes everything that as Christians we our attack on our values and the state of entertainment today. And like we almost think of like Disney as like a person, like this sort of entity that sort of is kind of pulling all the strings behind, rather than like Disney's like an umbrella that owns just like tons of different production companies and businesses. And so like this is on FXX, which they kind of inherited when they merged with Fox a couple of years ago. So I'm guessing I didn't go too deep into the details. Like I'm guessing the show is already in production, or at least like being made, because it's an animated show. Those take a long time when the merger happens. So again, it is under Disney. I guess officially kind of like Marvel's under Disney, even though it's Marvel or Lucasfilm. But it isn't on like Disney Plus, or it's not. This is on Hulu as far as streaming, which Disney owns, and then like on cable, I think it like plays on FXX at like 10 p.m. at night. It's like this isn't a show that necessarily like that they are marketing to kids. And I think for some people too, like the fact that it's a cartoon, if you're not like super plugged into sort of that whole industry, I think the idea of like adult cartoon, although it's been sort of a thing for since like The Simpsons or Family Guy, or like there is or South Park, like all these shows that are like they're cartoons, but like they play at night and they're for adults. Like
I still think that's kind of hard for a lot of people to kind of like make that leap in their head. It's like it's a cartoon, but this is not at all for kids. Like what's going on here? Like sort of short circuit if you see a cartoon that's like has adult content in it or like adult humor or whatever. It's sort of like, oh, what's going on here? They're trying to like indoctrinate our kids with this, but it's so I think some people are still kind of thrown off by the like animation not made for children.
Yeah, I think we sort of rush to the like, if it's a cartoon, then obviously they're making this for kids. If it's under the Disney umbrella, then obviously they're sort of marketing it for kids. So I guess at least for me, like with this story, like, I think there is stuff in here. A show about the Antichrist being like the protagonist.
Just like the synopsis that you read was just sort of like that seems like
so it's definitely not like a nothing, not like I just chill out. Is this the Antichrist? Like as Christians, like obviously it is like it makes you perk your head up. But I do think I think the first step for stuff like this is just like take a deep breath. Like don't, some of this like this total panic that we're gonna wake up tomorrow and like half our kids are gonna be like Satanists in some cult or something. Like I think as Christians, it's in the Bible speaks a lot about like this patience and like prudence and like not rushing to jump into conclusions. So I think that's part of it. I think another part of it too is just like don't force it to fit what it isn't. Like I don't think this is sort of part of the narrative of like Disney's coming for your kids in the same way that like I think like that Baymax show in some ways was a Disney coming for your kids kind of story. Where they were pushing ideologies clearly aimed at kids. Clearly they knew what they were doing with like the transgender flag and some of the storylines and stuff going in there. Like that to me is very much like a sort of fits in line with sort of this narrative of like Disney pushing ideologies on kids. Where this to me like doesn't fall in that same category for me. And I think that like the reason why that matters is like I feel like if we force everything to fit a narrative, whether it does or not, like then we don't really like work through like what actually this represents. Like
you kind of lose the narrative if you're always trying to like stuff into
it's like this is like this, but we want it to be this, so let's talk about this. And it's like so then we never get around to actually like
so it kind of reminds me of what like Lil Nas X has been doing like over the past couple of years, like with his I think he had like Satan shoes and like
that was a classic Collision Live episode
well, way back. But it's just sort of the stuff that it gets the response that some of these people want to elicit from, let's just say, like the religious community at large, and then it just kind of becomes a fixation on the thing that really isn't like the important thing. And so I think like with that, like everyone just was crazy about like the imagery or like blood in the shoes, whatever it was, I don't even remember, but and not so much on like this person's like dealing with the church growing up and being gay in the church and all this. Like there's so many like nuanced conversations that could be had that I think get lost because it's sort of like it's the whatever, and people just panic about it and don't dig deeper into like what's actually going on here and what are people trying to do, like. And so I think that's I like what you said about patience, and I think the main thing is just to not freak out if you can help it about some of this stuff, and just take a deep breath and think through like, okay, so A, this isn't for kids, B, yes, it is obviously very demonic in that sense, but I would venture a guess that like the people making the show aren't demonic. Like I think they're just like, hey, this is a thing in the world, and like wouldn't it be funny if,
because these sort of shows like what's the Adam Sandler did one, what was that show
called? Isn't it like
where he was like Satan's son?
I can, like
this sort of trope has been around for a while, and again, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're saying the Church of Satan produced their own faith-based film. It's I think it is just sort of like, hey, let's find like the most offensive, like scandalous kind of thing, and let's just sort of go gung ho with this dark comedy. And like to be clear, this show is vile. Like I watched part of one of these episodes. To kind of get into it, there's to sort of see what it was about, and like it's horrible. Like it's very profane, like even beyond the fact that it's about Satan and like the Antichrist. Like
the whole point of it is
hyper violent. Like there's like cartoon nudity in this. Like there's this like F-bombs all over the place. Like this is a show that's entirely trying to be like for comedic effect, like just vile and like push the envelope. And so the show itself is. It is a problematic show. I do think like the congressman that kind of brought this whole thing to light, like his issue even in his posts is one, like he's saying this is terrible, like we shouldn't have these sort of shows, but like he wasn't calling for like a boycott. He was more mad at like that they advertised the show in prime time, like during a football game, like. And I get that, like this is a show that's obviously not marketed for kids, and like it's plays when kids are asleep, and it's not on like the more childish streaming platforms.
Well, I think the takeaway really is. Like, why are you watching football?
Yeah, hey, I have never seen it in like in a hockey commercial. Maybe you just need to switch sports. But I do think I think and you kind of touched on this a little bit, but like at least for me, I feel like there is we get more worked up when it's like this on the nose of like when it uses like the imagery and like because like I would say like, a lot of the ideologies and like content and stuff in a lot of entertainment for adults and children is like very almost satanic. Like it's very
Yeah.
or at least like anti-biblical and like very not, the values of like the Bible and like, but it's because this is like, I think the same when we get into like witchcraft and some of those things, like because this is like actual Satan character.
Yeah. Well, I think because it is such an obvious thing, like I honestly don't think this. I think most Christians would have never even heard of this show. Like I think it probably would have been these shows like it's out there, but like most people don't know it existed. I didn't know it existed, and I think somebody kind of makes a stink about it, and then like it's sort of like, oh, like now the church is aware of it, and so we're gonna go after this, when it's like they run right past all the other like entertainment and problematic programming to like go attack this thing, which is it's one of those things where it's like I don't think anyone would have even paid attention to this show necessarily, except that like we had this big stink about it.
Yeah, the show is thrilled. I'm sure that they're having these conversations.
This is the best thing you could have done for this show, is to be outraged about it, I think.
And I think even like I think because it's so and because of the tone of this thing, like I think some of the like the panic response of like, this is going to pull our kids into like this satanic cult. Like I almost feel like it's the opposite. Like this is a show that's like sort of making very light, and I guess there's issues with that, like making light of the demonic forces and some of that. But like I can't imagine anyone watching like a cartoon of an over the top, silly devil character and being like, that's who I want to worship now in my life. Like this isn't a show that like I think although it becomes, because it's so on the nose, like it becomes more like, oh no, this is Satan, this is again, like I think far more like damaging and like dangerous is like the more subversive, like
this, for sure.
This doesn't have Satan. He's not like in the IMDb page as like playing Satan. But it very much is like dealing with ideologies and worldviews and stuff that is very like antithetical to like the Christian faith. Like to me, that is way more of like Christians need to be alert to that than like I don't think a cartoon, a silly cartoon, not silly, like a vile like. But like a dark comedic thing about Satan is necessarily going to be something that like, hey, I know this is just making fun of this character, but like, I'm going to go try and worship the real one. And like, I don't know. Like, I just.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's way less dangerous than like sort of normal shows that push a very like humanistic or sort of do it yourself mentality for people that don't teach, faith or whatever. Like, I think it can be way more dangerous to sort of internalize some of the messaging that comes from like family friendly stuff that is not at all in line with scripture.
And again, I think, to be clear, I think Christians should stay far away from this because it's vile and profane, and I think sinful, and it's just a bunch of gross stuff. But I don't think that like this is something that we need to like this is like recruiting people to become Satanists. Right? I don't think it's gonna have that kind of impact, but it is a reflection. I think it shouldn't maybe surprise us that like the world is just sort of like embracing and like making light of and like satanic stuff or like mocking God or like like that. It's in itself maybe it's not always on that like on the nose, but like it shouldn't surprise us that the world is not taking this stuff seriously. Like you can see that without watching the show that sort of what's going on. But hey, let us know if this is if you guys have any more questions about this or the show, or if you do find this more concerning than or troubling or just sort of any aspect. I do think it's something that Christians should kind of work through and think about. And I think it is. It's not silly to be like concerned that these sort of things are being made, but I think maybe some of the conclusions we can draw from this is maybe go beyond sort of the panic, the kind of the easier like Disney's the bad guy. Fight Disney, and kind of look at, hey, what does this reflect about our world? Why is these sort of shows kind of who is this sort of aimed at? So we'd love to have those conversations with you. But kind of final thoughts here for our episode. Again, hopefully we find Steven at some point today. Still trying to locate our technician, but hope he's doing okay. But a couple other things you can check out that you can find here at The Collision. I did do a review, speaking of sort of bad and Disney nostalgic, money grabs. Pinocchio, they remade this movie. It's like a live action, and then kind of released it with like no fanfare or marketing. And it's sort of like, Disney Plus Day. Oh, yeah, and there's Pinocchio. Now let's move on to the Marvel stuff. And there's a reason for it. This movie's not good, but hey, it's on Disney Plus. If you want to check it out, consider checking out our review first. Kind of some of the thoughts, and I think some like religious worldview stuff to maybe think about as you watch it that I kind of get into. But what else? Anything else going on for?
I just discovered a game called Polytopia, and you should probably discover it for yourself. And it's like a simplified version of Civilization, if you've ever played that. And it's probably where I'm going to spend most of my time now.
So, hey, maybe I'll go home and play Polytopia as Sam goes home and listens to some Rhapsody of Fire, and then we can both come report. I will say next week, we will have a live stream. We should if we can find Stephen. But it probably won't be a live stream. Joni's going to be off at Disneyland, into enemy territory, going to Disney.
To proselytize, I'm sure.
So we're spreading the gospel there.
He's going to take some tracks with her, I know.
And we'll actually be gone too. That's the only one of us that will be here is the one we can't find. But we are going to do, we will have an episode that I think we're going to record in this sort of more conversational roundtable. So encourage you, still join us. We'll still talk about some stuff. You can still throw comments in, and we can respond digitally to that, maybe even in real time. So join us again next week at noon for that. But thanks for joining us, guys. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, like the video, do all that stuff. Just join with what we're doing here. Got a lot of other stuff coming up as we kind of come to the back, the back nine of the year. So we'd love to have you join us. But thanks for watching, guys. Stay safe and continue to collide with your world for Christ.